Julianne Worm, and I am one of your hosts along with Ruth Milligan. I run TEDx East in New York City, and Ruth runs TEDx Columbus in Columbus, Ohio. We thank you so much for joining us. The goals of this webinar are pretty straightforward. Chris will be sharing the TED story, the important role of TEDx, discussing the core TED DNA, and kind of highlighting reciprocal learning, how that relationship between TED and TEDx. And I'm going to do some housekeeping before I hand the floor over. And the agenda for today. The webinar will be very precisely 60 minutes. So we want to make sure, respect your time, get you in and out on time. And so the first maybe 20 minutes will be Chris talking, and then we'll switch it over to a Q&A. And we want to thank you so much for sending in all your questions. And Ruth has been so gracious as to get those all kind of distilled and prepared and given us a chance to look them over and Chris a chance to think about them. So those will be the two main sections of this webinar. In terms of housekeeping, if there is time left over at the end, and we're not sure, because we're thinking the first section will be about 20 minutes and the second about 50, although it could go longer, we will take your questions that you can send in at any time. So you guys have the, you can click and put your hands up, et cetera, et cetera. I'll be monitoring those throughout the webinar. And finally, the last little bit of housekeeping are the polls. We have polls, 5 polls interspersed throughout the webinar. And these were actually questions that in preparation Chris came up with. And so we really look forward to getting your feedback on these as they relate to your experience with TEDx. And so to get started on that, we're going to go ahead and launch the first poll. As some practice, the poll is open, and you can see it's, have you hosted your first TEDx event? We'll leave the polls up for about 30 to 40 seconds as I kind of look at what percentage we have of response. Right now we're at about 70%, 75%. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share the poll. Now you guys should see it. About 67% of the participants online have yes hosted their first TEDx event. I'm going to go ahead and hide that. And now we will, it is with my greatest pleasure that I welcome and hand the floor over to Chris Anderson from TED. Thank you, Chris.
Hey, Julianne, thank you so much. And thank you, Ruth, too. And really thank you, everyone on the call. What's been happening with TEDx in the last year has been unbelievably exciting to everyone at TED HQ. And you know, so this is really great to have a chance to connect with you. I wish I could see you, but we'll settle for this. It's a pretty cool way of communicating. And I guess I'm just going to start by just diving in and telling you the TED story as at least as I experienced it. I mean, I think as you all know, TED started off as a for-profit conference, technology, entertainment, design. It was the founders perceived convergence between those three things and decided to do a conference that was a lot broader than most conferences out there. And it was a surprise to a lot of people that it worked, that you could, in a world where we're told that you're successful by digging deep and specializing, that people got a lot of value out of going a little broader and finding that, for example, the technologists and the designers had a lot to say to each other, to learn from each other, and that having that spirit of entertainment in there not only was extra content, but actually infused the way in which TED was done and gave it a broader, richer, more emotional experience than people were perhaps used to in a conference, so that from the start there was performance and music and so forth. And over the years, the content continued to broaden, and by the time I went there for the first time in '98, it was already a little broader than technology, entertainment, design. So that was my first trip to TED in Monterey 12 years ago, and I just fell in love with it. I felt like I'd come home, and that instead of, I spend most of my social time as the kind of nerdy, slightly awkward guy at the end of the bar who doesn't really know how to have a conversation about the latest movie or some sort of personal gossip or whatever. In some ways, people who know me say I live a bit in my head and love the world of ideas. And at TED, I found all these other people who although less socially awkward than me, were nonetheless interested in that. They were interested in dreaming and talking big and talking crazy ideas. It was okay to have a conversation about, hey, we could launch this thing and maybe it would make a difference. Maybe it might even change the world. And so that was exciting. I didn't get the format at first. I mean, I was listening to all these people and wondering why I was listening to an architect and a scientist the next moment. And on day 3, I heard Amy Mullins speak, and she spoke about, her story of being, paraplegic, and how, despite that, she was able to win these races. And then halfway through the talk, she rolled her pant legs up and unscrewed her legs and sort of, passed them around. And she was so engaging and so inspiring, and I found myself shedding a tear. And I kind of suddenly got the power of, it was my first TED moment, and got the power of mixing in storytelling into an otherwise, the kind of left brain analytical mix that people normally have. Anyway, I was hooked, and was a media person at the time. I was running this magazine publishing company, getting on for a couple thousand employees, and part of me looked at TED through a media lens. In media, my whole fascination was not with the way that attention is normally measured. As you all know who know about media, that, attention is the currency, and usually people measure and look at the quantity of attention. So they look at ratings, circulation, viewerships, and so forth. And those are all important, but what I was especially interested in was the quality of attention, which is basically measured on the passion scale. How passionate are your readers or viewers or participants? And what I noticed at TED was that the passion rating was off the chart. So you not only had some of the world's most influential people together, you had them at a time where they were saying this was the highlight of their year. You owned their minds for 4 days. So although the numbers were low, it was just 800 people, the passion level was astonishing. And it felt, as a media person, it felt to me like there was something very, very special here indeed. It felt, to hear a refrain I'll be repeating, that TED has this kind of life of its own, and that that there was something that could be done with that. To cut a long story short, I ended up within the next couple of years beginning conversations with Richard Werman, the founder, about TED's future, and he was 65 and was thinking it would be nice to cash in because he had turned this, it was a for-profit event, and he had turned it into a big commercial success. It was 800 people meeting once a year. It was selling out in advance. It was making money, and he wanted to cash in, and so we agreed a purchase of the property, and it was, the purchase actually happened in 2 steps. I won't bore you with the story, but took place in 2000 and then 2001, and there was a transition period. So I bought it in the end with a foundation and decided that TED would work better as a not-for-profit. I'd had a brutal beating up in the whole NASDAQ crash of 2000-2001, and it was actually incredibly, in some ways I feel almost, the process of moving back into the world of ideas, out of the world of business, kind of saved me in a way. It was, I was kind of shocked at how much I'd let my own happiness get tied up in just sort of growing a business. And getting back into the world of ideas was thrilling. But TED was still felt like a risk. I didn't know how to do a conference. And the only thing I took comfort in was that there was this incredible momentum behind it, that I didn't think it was just Richard's charismatic personality. It really felt like there was a community there that loved the experience, and that speakers would keep coming even if they were invited by a less experienced organizer, and that the audience would keep coming because the speakers would be there and because they liked each other. And so 2003 was the first TED, and it was kind of clumsy in that first time especially. I think I probably put a bit too much non-profit lens into it. I sort of immediately wanted it to sort of make a difference in the world, and the risk was that it got, a little too causey, if you like, as a result. And we lost a few people early on. But I did feel, that the justification for putting it into a nonprofit, or part of it, was that something amazing was happening at TED. By day 3 or 4 of the conference, you had this extraordinary sense of inspiration and possibility that really everyone felt. And nothing was being done with that. It felt like people were dying to actually do something, to turn all that inspiration into something real. And so my first thought in terms of moving, TED forward was that we should tap into it, and that's really what led to the TED Prize and the thought that you could turn that inspiration into actual sort of world-changing action somehow. But as we continued with it, there was this riddle of what do you do with the content of TED? It was clearly something that a lot of other people would like to listen to, but it wasn't clear what was the best way to do that, how you could, let it out into the world as a whole. This was pre-YouTube. Web distribution was not an option back then, and so we thought that television really did present an option, that there ought to be a TV version of TED possible, and started exploring that. And I hired June Cohen to head up an effort to let TED free, so to speak. And the TV companies all really turned us down. I mean, we thought we had a pretty good idea for how you could turn it into a TV show. They thought talking heads traditionally don't make great television, so we didn't make progress. And in the end, we decided, seeing YouTube take off, that, well, maybe we could try this online experiment and put some of the talks up, and maybe it won't feel like giving away the crown jewels. Maybe the community will let us do that. And to our joy, they did. I think the surprise when we first put talks up in 2006 was that the response. I had thought that a huge part of the experience of TED could only be felt live. Part of me still feels that, and which is why TEDx, and we'll come on to that. But the amazing thing was that people responded to these videos, not just, I like that, but, oh my goodness, that's incredible. I'm sitting here in front of the computer crying, or, wow, I've got to tell 10 of my friends. I mean, we just felt the passion coming back in the responses. And so it wasn't really because of the numbers. I mean, the numbers were decent early on with the first few releases, but it was the tone of the response that convinced me and the team that we had to really reconfigure the whole of TED. And so in early 2007, we announced this big change where TED was now not so much a conference as a website. Ideas were spreading, and that was the whole mission. And since then, with the new site, we've just seen continued traffic growth, and it's been, frankly, completely and utterly exhilarating. I mean, as a media person, seeing this stuff take on a life of its own, grow essentially without spending a single marketing dollar, grow simply because people like you, tell other people about the talks. That's really, really been amazing to see. And it helped us adopt, this idea of radical openness. The fact that the community who attended the conference, instead of being mad that we were giving away the content, cheered us on. And the fact that thousands more people started wanting to come because it was online just showed the power of in certain circumstances, you give away something for free, and the result is just amazing. And we have tried to let that inform whatever we do since then. So when it came time to think, we're supposed to be global, how do we do that? Translating, you have to get it right. These talks are really important. Surely you have to hire all these professional translators. Well, we decided no, we'll let the community translate. And by doing it that way, it's resulted in this explosion of translations, far more than we could possibly have afforded, so that we're in all these languages now, and that's been an amazing thing to see. And then there's TEDx, and it's amazing to me to think that it's barely 18 months ago that Lara Stein and I, sat down and we talked about whether there was a way of responding to the extraordinary number of requests for us to hold a TED in this country or that city, whether there was a way of adapting the open approach to it. And there was, I have to say, internally, externally, there was a lot of skepticism about it. The first instinct response was, you're going to kill the brand, you're going to dilute it. Who knows what people will do with it? And so it was with some nervousness that we kind of moved the thing forward. But also, there'd just been enough instances of great people in the community who had done interesting things to keep us believing that this actually could work. So we tried the experiment. It was launched. It was a very soft launch in the I guess the spring of last year. And honestly, I would have been thrilled if there had been 30 or 40 events out there. What happened utterly took our breath away. Not just the number of events, the fact that there were 500 in the first year and the numbers are accelerating now. What really took our breath away was the quality, that people had the kahunas to go out and, book a movie theater and do these. We were thinking this would be events of 50, 60 people. Some of them are, and they can be great at that level, but people doing 500, 600 people and more, pulling in their own speakers, and executing at an unbelievably high level. Almost every event, the feedback we've had from people is that it's ranged from sort of, that was a good day where I learned something, through to that was utterly transformative for me personally and possibly for the city that I live in. It's been incredible, and I'll tell you this. I've talked about this phenomenon with a range of people out there in both the business and the conference world. There is no straight precedent for this. This is something really, really, really remarkable that is happening, and you guys are doing it. It's a project of this type that's being done for passion is and taking off at this pace in so many countries so fast. No one can point me to a precedent. So we're all, in a way, engaged in an incredible experiment together, and it's a thrilling experiment, frankly, with the capability to make a big difference in the world, to make an impact on how the world learns. Where it's going, we shall see. In fact, I think there's a question about that, so I'll come to that in a bit. But what I'll say right now is that every one of you in our books is doing something really heroic. I mean, you're investing quite extraordinary amounts of time, stress, sometimes money, into an event that offers little back except the thrill of seeing people connect and learn and turned on by ideas. How cool is that? It's really very, very cool. And so first of all, the number one thing I really want you to hear from me is that even though I don't have time to view every single event and write to you personally and see you personally, in my book you're all engaged in heroic activity, and I just huge thanks from me for what's happening here, because I do think it's really special. And from TED's point of view, we think that, and this is again perhaps a surprise, although perhaps it shouldn't have been. I think that one of the biggest ways that TED will move forward in the next few years is by learning from you. This is absolutely not a one-way process. Engage the fact that every week, there's like 10 of these experiments happening. The best single thing that I can have myself and the team do is just open our eyes and look at what you're doing, because in many cases, you're experimenting is you're going to come up with the killer idea that helps us raise the bar ourselves. So, we've already seen lots of ways in which you've moved more nimbly than we can. You've come up with ideas that we never thought of, and it's just totally and utterly exciting. And I think just on the speaker front, we had never really envisioned there would be a huge number of self-organized talks coming out of this. The quality of the talks that you're coming up with and of the speakers you're hiring and what you're getting from them is wonderful. And over time, I think it's going to start to become, almost like the dominant source of talks on TED.com, where you're helping. One of the ways of thinking of this is that you're helping create this incredible engine for soliciting knowledge from the world's great teachers in whatever country they're in, and to be able to bring that to a central source and then let it out to people who most need to know. That's really, really thrilling to me as well. So, I see. So I think that's why TEDx matters. Top tips from my experience, and then we'll move on to the next section. My first tip is just learn from each other, so I offer these in the spirit of you may already be ahead of me. I mean, you've got the materials that we put out, but I think the key thing to think about is that as in any media thing, I mean the whole battle is over attention and what people do with it. The fact that in the TED format, we're getting prepared material from a speaker is incredibly important. Most conferences, people are talking off the top of their head, blah blah blah, and it's sometimes good, but it's very patchy, and you lose people. When speakers prepare, there's just a much greater chance of real fireworks going off in the listener's brain, and so the whole event needs to be geared around the chances of maximizing that. And I think there are several things that really help. I mean, just in terms of the venue, having a sense of proximity to the speaker and a sense of the audience being aware of each other, I think those two things really help. So having a stage at the end of a long, thin hall is much harder to have that sense of presence than a stage on the side of a hall, and if you like, the audience kind of tiered around it, so that the audience can kind of see each other, and so that the back row isn't that far from the stage physically. You can't always do that, but that certainly helps. Being pretty strict about not having computers open everywhere, all around the room, I personally think is good. I think most people cannot resist the temptation of a live internet connection, and if, as it happens in every talk, a speaker gets boring for 30 seconds, someone goes to their email, once you've lost them then, and then when the speaker gets interesting, they won't receive it. So it's good to be pretty disciplined on focus on the stage. The right variety of talks. I mean, there's always a balance between having a theme, which is probably a good idea, but within that having enough variety so that every part of the brain is stimulated. The key thing is don't think about it intellectually, think about it in terms of the different emotional stimuli that happens. So, if you have great music, it just takes people to a different place and allows the other stuff to happen. It really allows the sense of possibility much more play. So laughter, emotion, those things, as I think you all know, they're absolutely core to the TED formula. And even if you just inject a 3-minute little burst in between two more serious speakers, that makes a giant difference. And then finally, and this is probably the number one thing, the right kind of speaker prep is just critical. Speakers aren't always used to this format. Getting them to agree, to promise, to swear blind that they'll prepare to the time limit, and really take the talk seriously. That's key. That's absolutely critical. And then getting them past the point where they're not just sort of reciting, sort of in stage fright, reciting a talk that they've memorized, but connecting as a human to the audience. I love to encourage eye-to-eye contact, so that they're looking at different people all the time, and it feels like, there's a human connecting to human in that way. So those are just a few things, and frankly, I'm eager to hear your tips back as well as to what you have really learned. And I hope after this you'll actually email me, chris@ted.com, and tell me your takeaway from, especially those of you who've done an event. So Julianne, I think I'm going to pass back to you at this point, and we'll move on to the next piece.
Great! Wow, that was amazing, Chris. Thank you. I mean, so much in there. I wanted to do a quick poll and kind of get a sense from our group what they think. I think you said some amazing things, and I'm wondering what they think about what their best size for a TEDx event is. Is it under 100? Is it 100 to 300 or over 300? And it's really interesting as the poll is coming in that the majority of people are saying we're at 55% of those polled over 300. 56%. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll, and so we'll display that and share that out with you guys. That's really interesting. So 50% think that a big event is the size of an event to have. I don't know if that's surprising or not. We're going to go ahead on, and I'm going to advance slide that. Here we go. We get to the poll. Now we have a bunch of questions from TEDxers that you guys have sent in, and so I'm going to go ahead and hand the floor over to Ruth Milligan, who's going to take on this section. Ruth?
Great. Thanks, Julianne, and thanks to everyone who has submitted questions today. We had a lot to choose from, and we've picked some of the top ones, so we'll just go ahead and get started. So, Chris, just leading from your talk specifically about the future of TEDx, you deferred to let us talk about it now, so thanks for that. Where do you see it being in 5 or 10 years?
So what I'd say to that is this. First of all, as I mentioned, just a year ago, we thought that maybe we'd get 30 or 40 events. I mean, maybe Lara was much more ambitious than that, but honestly, that's what I thought. So we're clearly not good at predicting, and I think that's a good thing, because this is how I think of TED generally, and certainly TEDx, which is that our growth strategy is not to be done with a map. It's to be done with a compass. We don't know the future. We don't, to be able to say we're going to this point on the map, I think is actually probably incredibly limiting. I see us as on an adventure with a bunch of heroic fellow travelers, and and we're operating by compass, not map. And the compass is a good one because it has its values are built into it and help give a clear direction, and those values include things like being open, trusting the community, believing that there really is this global hunger for knowledge, and that if you offer it to people the right way, they will be thrilled to participate, to learn, to be part of the journey. And so I think it's early stage. I think I'm pretty confident that this is just the beginning, and that there's going to be a lot of growth, whether in number of events or whether in the size of the individual events and ambition level. I don't know. It's amazing to me that there's hundreds of very competent organizers around the world willing to put in the time and effort to do something as challenging as put on one of these. Maybe there are more of them out there, but I think that even without that, there's plenty of growth that we here on the call today can expect to see. As I think what I hope happens is that each of you really feels that you're building up your own local community, and that community starts to have a real sort of sense of self-awareness as a community, and that as well as being part of the bigger, global TED community, that there's a desire to connect and to move the conversation forward. My picture of the world is that we are able to see each other more clearly for the first time, that this incredible power of online videos connecting millions of people around the world in unexpected ways. And if we'll just open our eyes and look, we can learn from each other so quickly. But at the same time, that we're all spending so much time online, people are craving the live human-to-human experience as well. And so I think, there's no precedent to this. You are all engaged in your own experiment of what a live community devoted to living in the world of ideas and taking those ideas and making something meaningful from them, to what that can be. Our goal is going to be to watch you, to cheer you on, to learn from you, and to share your knowledge with others in the community so that we can all learn from each other. Where that goes, I don't know, but I think it's incredibly thrilling. I think it's incredibly optimistic for the future of the world overall. And it's going to be a great experience to see what lies around the next bend.
Great, thanks. Sort of an offshoot of that question. Well, before I ask that, you were talking about amazing organizers. We would be remiss if we didn't tell you how much Laura has done for all of us, and is an amazing organizer herself in getting us to where we are. So thanks to you, Laura. You're on the call, but you're muted. So
I'm muted.
We appreciate you. We appreciate you very much. Ted, with regard, Chris, with regard to TED being it's a volunteer army right now, if you will. We may not understand your business model, but do you ever see the two blending in terms of us being a permanent part of the sort of TED infrastructure?
Okay, so I actually misread this question first time around as do you see TEDx being a volunteer army in the future, meaning with the focus being on this sort of giant movement of people, but the question is actually being more than a volunteer army, which I guess that means, is this something you can make a living off at some point in the future? I don't know the answer to that. I think it's still early days. But what I will say is that we've really been surprised on the upside at every stage at how much effort has got into these events, how much talent there is. And if someone said, I want to do this full time, and here's how we can do it economically, we'd listen. I think we have to listen, as a way of seeing this thing grow. So we don't have an answer for that. I think that's going to be an ongoing conversation. There are huge risks once you start putting money into it and allowing people to be paid or whatever. It's just suddenly resentment can really start, and I've seen this happen in several instances where something that works just beautifully as a volunteer effort starts to break down once you introduce money. So I'd say that we would it may be some while before it moves beyond that, but we certainly do see it possible that these events over time may scale further in ambition level, and that's just going to be the right way to go. So nothing more precise to say than that, I'm afraid, other than that we'll listen to you.
Great. Well, now we want to move on to sort of a more colorful subject. And really, I'm just going to summarize it by saying, talk to us about Sarah Silverman and what happened at TED.
Oh, boy. So I don't know how many of you followed this online. It had its entertaining moments. Sarah Silverman was at the last conference in Long Beach. As most of you know, she's a comedian known for provocative material, shall we say? And TED is always trying to do this balance where you want the conference to be interesting. There's definitely a role for provocation of the right kind at an event. It would be tragic if if we stop taking risks and so forth. What happened in this particular case was that, I had a conversation with her beforehand, talking about what typically was, made for a successful talk at TED by a comedian, which is where the key common ingredient is spend time there. Spend time, understand the audience, and do something that pays some kind of recognition to what's gone on before, and connects into the program in some way. And I also said, just on the on the level of how extreme do you go, that that the conference, as far as TED.com is concerned, we have libraries subscribing, kids subscribing. There's, it's not going to work to go with the more extreme material. But intelligent provocation, absolutely go for it. So that was the conversation that I thought I'd had. She didn't obviously hear it quite that way, and went with some of her more extreme material, and there was a couple of sketches in there that some people found funny and some found truly beyond offensive. I had this sort of strong sense, I wasn't hosting that session, but I had a strong sense that there was certainly a key portion of the TED community there that was really quite deeply upset, and where when you feel like you're part of a community and you see other people laughing and cheering something that you personally find just truly offensive, that can be quite damaging. You can lose someone. You can lose someone's support in that. So I don't know. I felt at the time the need to distance TED from Sarah a bit, and did it absolutely the wrong way. I do not recommend this. So I tweeted criticism of her, saying I thought the performance was god awful, and provoked something of a Twitter war with her many followers and so forth. So I apologized to her for the tweet, and tried to clarify to the conference that that she'd done her thing, and that there'd been a misunderstanding over the briefing, and that TED would actually would continue to take risks, but we'd try and do it the right way, and so it kind of has just about fizzled out at this point. But that was what happened then. In terms of advice to you, I'd say it's always a tough judgment as to how far you go. Different people will draw the line in different places. I think TED does have basic values around sort of human decency at some point, and there's a level of destructive or demeaning humor that probably is slightly off-brand, but different people, one person's hilarity is another person's upset in this regard, and it is a tough judgment call. So we don't want to be bland. We want to take risks. I think the key is probably to try to engage people, prep them, and possibly also prep the audience. I think in this case, if people have been prepped a bit, that you could interpret Sarah Silverman's act as being that of a character, deliberately being provocative. It would have taken some of the sting out of it. So that's a kind of that's how I see it now. I mean, if I had a chance again, we might have tried. I think we could have got her to work, but might have briefed her differently, or it may be that she's just not someone who would take direction in this case, and that the actual original booking was a mistake. There's probably difference of views of that in TED still, but that's my takeaway. We're still going to take risks. We're just going to try and prep speakers better in future.
Just a quick follow-up to that. Have you ever had any speakers resist your coaching and turn down giving a talk because of it?
Who turned down giving a talk?
Because they didn't want to follow your guidelines?
No, we haven't. We occasionally definitely get people who are kind of, hey, look, I talk to audiences all the time. Don't worry about it, and then sometimes they come to TED and think, I wish I'd listened, because they slightly misfire. But no, I've never had someone pull out. I do think it's there's a tone issue in terms of coaching people where it's important, and especially I think this actually applies even more for you guys, that being too pushy about speakers they can get offended and sort of think we're being arrogant. Important not to do that. Important rather just to say, look, this is an unusual format, and we just want to give you every chance to shine and be the best you can be. That's all.
That's good advice. Julianne, do we have?
And you know what I was going to say? I just find listening to Chris so interesting. I want to make sure we get all the questions in. So maybe at the end we'll come back to the polls. Let's just keep going on. I could just sit here and listen to Chris all the time. Okay.
Great. Our next one has to do with a question that was submitted about TED videos played at TEDx events. And the question evolved from the notion that we have so much content that we're trying to fit in to our own events, and feeling like the TED videos aren't, while they're very important and very entertaining, what's their role in the future at our events?
So this is another area where TEDx in practice has again blown away our initial expectations. The initial rules on TEDx were that at least half the content had to be TED videos, and in fact we assumed that in many cases it would be 100% TED videos, that people were basically taking a kind of curation role and sharing those. And the other reason for doing this is just thinking about the TED brand, that if you're going to allow that brand out there, then there needs to be by having TED Talk videos in there, at least even though we can't be there, it ensures that there's some TED content out. And the truth is that the the videos selected for online distribution, which are only a percentage of the videos of the talks from TED conferences, most of them are very good, and they're from sort of people who are great speakers. Our assumption was it would be hard to match that locally across the whole program. I think we've been stunned at how successful people have been at pulling in really great speakers locally, and we already have agreed to cut back the number of videos to, I guess it's meant to be 25%, or at least a minimum of 2 videos, or 25%, whichever's greater, I think. With some organizers, we've been flexible. Where people have a track record of doing a great event, I think we are willing to be flexible. But for someone who's brand new to TED and putting it on for the first time, they're one way that we've got of sort of ensuring that at least there's some TED-like content in there. So I don't think we're religious about this completely going forward. I think I would totally applaud people for doing an amazing job of bringing on content that's actually better than the videos. And I've also noticed, I think it was at one of the events, maybe it was TEDx Amsterdam, where there was some of the TEDx videos were being shown, and on the stream they were showing audience reactions to them as well as the videos, which I thought gave it an incredibly wonderful, fresh edge. It's one of the many examples of learning from it. So I think there's some flexibility, but I think I guess I'd encourage people to really look through the set. It's just not true that with 700 or whatever it is videos that are up online now, most of the audience will not have seen certain video choices that you make. And so if you find the hidden gems, and that can include the short ones, some of them are just 3 minutes, that they ought to be able to be an ad. And I think in some of the TEDx's that I've seen and looking on Twitter, in many cases they have been played an important role in the program. So that's the history of it, and we may not be completely religious about it in every case going forward, but I think at least in your first event, you need to stick to that rule.
Great. Speaking of videos, do you have time, or do you watch any of our TEDx videos?
No, absolutely, and I wish. I mean, someone could spend literally their entire life now, like in full-time TED mode. You could go to a different city every day, TED conference. Maybe one day I'll take off a year and just do that. I've seen some of the streams in part. I've seen a good number of the videos, and my jaw keeps dropping. It's truly thrilling seeing the quality of some of the talks, and how in recent months as well, the way that they're being recorded is really fully up to TED standards as well, and makes it possible for us to consider releasing on the main website.
Let me just stop and let everyone know that next month our webinar topic will be about that very subject, on the technical side of producing your TED event and getting the best video. So thanks for that bridge. We wanted to also just ask a quick question, which was, what do you look for in taking a TEDx video to the TED stage?
In taking a TEDx video to TED.com, I guess.
Right, that's what I meant.
Really the same thing that we're looking for in any TED Talk. We're just looking for someone who's genuinely a remarkable person, sharing their passion or their knowledge in a way that's accessible and compelling. There's 100 different ways to do a great TED Talk, and I think it feels like we're learning new ones every time. It's hard to give specific rules other than someone who makes your whole crowd rise to their feet may well be a candidate, but the talks that probably won't make it are ones that have a very a local remit, or ones that, while being sort of emotional and worthy in some sense, and getting sort of saying to people, come on, let's all work together for a better future or whatever, don't add material new content. So we want something that's more than just emotion or there needs to be, in most cases, like a knowledge component. But I think you're going to see an acceleration in the number of TEDx videos online in the next couple months. I've actually taken personal responsibility for looking at the best candidates and pushing them through. We're still working on the process here, but for me, it's a personal priority to dramatically increase the number of TEDx talks on the website. So I can answer your question better in about 2 months' time when I've seen a broader range of them.
Great. Thanks for that. So talk to us a little about this last question on this slide, about the TED Prize, and if there's a possibility that TEDx prizes maybe in the future.
So, the underlying question here is, how do we take ideas into action? I think most of us are motivated to do that in some way. That's certainly why the TED Prize was launched. I think there's two pieces here. One is, what might TEDx involvement be in the TED Prize itself? Is it just me, by the way, Julianne? I'm now hearing quite a bad echo on the line.
I know, I am too, and I think it's on your end because everyone else is muted.
Let me see what I can do here. Hang on. Okay. I'm going to shut down my computer a sec, if that helps. Okay, is this better? No?
I'm not hearing it.
Yeah, you're not hearing the echo now? I am.
No.
I'm hearing the echo too, Chris.
Yeah, let me. You know what? I'm going to dial back in. I'm sorry for this. Give me a couple minutes.
I'll do the polls while you dial in. No problem.
Do a few polls. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Because this is like just thinking on your feet here. So let me pull up. And thanks so much, Bruce. And one of the things that Chris wanted to know that we put in was, as TEDx licensees, have you had a chance to attend TED? Wow, 86% not yet. Okay. We're now about 23, 24, 25% not yet. And
Okay, let's see if this is any better. It's not, is it?
How's that? Try that, Chris.
So I don't know if any of the geniuses online have any technical tips on why this webinar, even with the computer shut down, would generate that problem.
Well, I think we were actually close to the end of the main questions. We had a few follow-ups. Do you want to try to go ahead and answer them, or do you want to just stop there?
Okay.
I think we're pretty close to the end of what we wanted.
All right. So just quickly on the TED Prize. I don't like the idea of lots of smaller TED Prize, TEDx Prize brands spreading out across there. I think it'll be confusing to people. I think there's huge brand power in having a TED Prize winner. So I would say that for local initiatives, I'm all for action coming out of an event, and I think it can just be a local project, a local initiative, a story, and that we would love to hear those stories and celebrate them. But I just don't think it should be around the word prize. TED Prize certainly, TEDx Prize even, I think is liable to be confusing. That's my current thought. As far as the TED Prize itself is concerned, I think that we are in the process of trying to invent new ways for a much wider community of people to engage in the prize, basically by creating a web platform that will allow people to self-organize responses. So it's watch this space, but it's a big priority for us right now. For Jamie Oliver's wish, there have been 1,500 offers of help. That can't be organized top-down. So if we're successful with that, I love the idea of your meetings finding ways to pick up on one or more of the prize winners and contributing. And again, part of that process would be to celebrate the people who do that.
Great, thanks. Are you still feeling your echo? Chris?
Sorry?
Can you still hear your echo?
I am hearing a bit of an echo, but if it's not driving everyone else crazy, I can live with it too.
Yeah, we're okay. Julianne, are you okay? She's muted. We'll keep moving. We just had a few other questions that came in, and one of them was, you talked a little about this, so I don't know, it might be a quick answer. What made you take this from a closed club to the world? You addressed that earlier. Was there anything you wanted to add?
No, I mean, I'd always, when I started my foundation, I'd always wanted to find, something significant to do, and it wasn't, it's actually really hard to figure that stuff out. So, when TED came on, I mean, it just became this incredibly exciting dream that you might be able to, take what was a closed event and find a way of letting that knowledge out into the world. There's never, as a former philosopher, I say that, someone who read philosophy at university, there's just no greater leverage than an idea in terms of making change. And so it was exciting, and I just, didn't know how to do it. Bringing in the team that's come in the last few years, starting with June Cohen and others, has been what's made it possible. And now, Lara and her group doing this. So every day here there's a sort of an ongoing conversation about how could we continue the journey and do it the right way. But because it's certainly started with very, very small steps, but a big dream.
Great. I'm going to combine two of these last questions since we just have about 5 minutes left, and we talked earlier how they might be brief ones. But do you ever feel before the start of a conference that sort of panic that all of us may have felt as organizers right before it starts? And then at the end, how do you come down from it? We've heard stories from those who've been to TED about how overwhelming but also exhilarating it is. What do you do to sort of process what you've heard and what you've experienced?
occasionally fear and panic. It is less now than it used to be. I remember in the first TED, I thought I was looking forward to it. I thought it was all great. And then 3 hours before the stage moment, I was just engulfed by choking, sickening fear. It was going to be a horrible disaster. And I still have TED dreams where I wake up, where I think I'm, doing this great event, turn around and the audience has all left. And it's pretty distressing, but it's getting better.
But they've never left, so hopefully that's never.
And
that would
I
be
think
more like a nightmare than a dream, right?
they're usually, they're definitely of a pattern, and I'm happy when I wake up. And I think the last question, although I don't, did you say something about coming down after an event? I don't see that question on my screen.
Well, it's the last one. Julianne, go ahead and punch through the last two, and you can go back to the favorite speaker question. I was just trying to couple those, the sort of coming into the event and leaving the event. What's your,
right?
How do you process through it?
So going in, it's just amidst all the preparation, it's just really important to take a couple of hikes and get out into nature and just think, and at least that's what really helps me. Just dream about the bigger goal, the bigger picture, the bigger hope, and that often brings with it a sort of peace, even when there's sort of details that still need figuring out. And then as far as after the event, where it's easy, especially after 4 days, to have a bit of a crash. I think the key thing is just to know that it's coming, and to celebrate it if it's not as bad as it was the prior year. but the good news is you quickly get over that, and about, at least my experience is that 8 hours after the event you can feel pretty low. 36 hours after, glowing and excited and looking forward.
And since we have 3 minutes left, we can go back and, sorry, I skipped this one, about, we don't suspect you'll share a favorite speaker, or do you?
I mean, the talks I love best are the ones that give me a new lens to look at the world in, and it's amazing how many of those there have been over the years, whether my very first TED speaker I put on the TED stage was Dan Dedek. He gave this talk, Ants, Terrorism, and Memes, that was just a fabulous, different way of looking at the world of ideas. I love that talk, and many others like it over the years. But I think my single biggest thrill in the last couple of years was seeing this big experiment by satellite that we did, where we had these kids in Venezuela as youth orchestra celebrate the TED Prize wish of Abreu. And the quality of their performance and the way it was filmed, and the fact that all of the technology worked against all expectations. It was just fantastic, and it sparked probably the longest standing hour in TED's history, all over video, which is interesting. So that was a great moment. And if you haven't seen that, you really should look at that.
We will. Well, we've got 2 minutes left. Chris, thank you for all the answers and great insight that you've shared. And Julianne, do you want to close it out for us? Maybe not. It seems like we've lost Julianne.
We've lost Julianne. That's not good.
Julianne, come back. We'll just let Chris. Is there any final thoughts that you want to share with the group before we break off at 7?
Just that I really think this project matters. I think there must be times when you guys are, in your umpteenth hour of stress over the preparation, where you think, why on earth did I take this on? Ideas are a big deal. They change how people see themselves. They change what they do. They change history. And you're helping make the world think smarter. You're helping foster connections based on learning, on the truth, on a group of people who care together about making a better future. So it's heroic work, it's hard work, and we're kind of engaged in this magical journey together. The outcome is uncertain, but I think it's going to be beautiful. So I just wanted to thank you again for being part of it. It's really wonderful.
I'm back on. I had to mute myself. I apologize. I was trying to keep control of the echo, which it wasn't coming from this end. But Chris, thank you so much. I found your words to be so inspirational and your experience so useful as a TEDx organizer. And we appreciate you taking the time to share so much of what you did with us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.